Why did you not require allocution in this plea deal? Why did you not require it? And let him skirt out of answering the question.
Yes, exactly. And here's an interesting thought today, right? Everybody's circling the wagons to say, look what we did, look what we did, look what we did. And they're forgetting that there's a lot of information that's still behind the curtain. Okay. Yep. And what the university is hoping in the handbook, okay, that strategically you release 314 pages, but you don't tell them what you did. Okay, because they have to by law. But what about all the other stuff that's sitting on his phone? Then you say, well, we don't have a motive. This isn't sexually motivated. They weren't stalked. There's absolutely no evidence of Kaylee or Maddie, which that could be that piece of, where the new chief said, no, they're not on his phone. Well, that could be, but are there others on his phone? Are there other sorority girls on his phone? Are there pictures of Ted Bundy on his phone? Is he dressing up like Ted Bundy? I like the answer that the lieutenant gave when she questioned, well, what about the thumb picture? And he goes, well, there's a lot of pictures of him with his thumb up. You didn't answer the question. Okay. That wasn't the question. Are there pictures of him with his thumb up right after the murder? Okay. And if so, why is that the case? That's the question. And how does he answer? Well, sometimes we don't know the why. Okay. And when you hear that, you go, wait a minute. You're an investigator and you don't have a theory? Then how without that DNA, I got to be thinking, and I said this to Billy the other day, what the heck, Over? Okay. What the heck? Even a criminal, even Brian Koberger has a theory. And you're making him look smarter throughout this whole thing. And listen to this answer, or listen how the chief responded to Levy on
I think it's interesting because Moscow's
the crime fix. Okay.
We've had some bigger incidences,
Listen,
it would always be nice to have an answer to everything, but the reality is that we don't always have that luxury.
What do you say to those families who feel like that was doing a deal with the devil?
We made a proposal on our terms, not his.
I think there's still those who feel like it's what he wanted was life in prison versus the death penalty.
I don't know what was going through his head or what he wanted. One way or another, he's going to be in prison until he dies.
But, I think it's interesting because Moscow's an interesting town. We've had some bigger incidences.
They've had some bigger incidences. This is the crime of probably at least the last 10 years around the United States. But apparently this chief feels that his town has had bigger problems than 4 dead students off campus of the university. What say you, Karen?
And let's remind everybody, this was the police chief who was there when the murders happened. It was all under his watch. He's the one that allowed the University of Idaho PR folks to not just be in the circle of the daily investigative updates, but, completely invited them in. This guy, this James Fry, who's now retired, he's been retired for a bit. He was there at ground zero with everybody. And I think this guy set the tone for how the victims' families were treated. And you'll see in this interview, his words, what he says, speak volumes. And now we can kind of compare that with, now I kind of know what the families are talking about of what they've gone through.
So let's go back to the reports. Okay. This is Captain Barrett. First of all, administrators do not investigate murders. Chiefs, captains, they are administrators. They are the ones that provide you with the resources. Do you need coffee? Do you need donuts? Do you need tape recorders, etc.? That's rule number one. Okay. So let's read Captain Barrett's report. And you'll notice here where I have highlighted, I called Chief Fry, Captain Lanier, and Captain Dellinger. These are the administrators of the police department. Their job is to administrate. That's what they do. They're no longer on the street. They're not investigators. They're not street cops. They are administrators. That's why they're called administration. On every website in the United States of America, on every police department, FBI, whatever, they're called directors on the FBI or the federal system. Okay. So he calls everybody and lets them know about the homicide. It's right there. I called Detective Sergeant Lawrence. Why? Because he's a detective and he's a supervisor over the detectives. That's his job. His job is to now run the team, but not necessarily be the point. That's called the case agent. The detective sergeant says, McDonough, you're the case agent. That means I now take control of the entire case. And in fact, I write an affidavit for a search warrant. And in this case, okay, I called Detective Sergeant Lawrence, this is the captain, told him about the homicide and asked him to call in detectives. Okay. Sergeant Lawrence said he would call in Sergeant Blaker and Corporal Payne to assist as well. Why? Because they were slated to rotate into detectives. So they're in the pipeline to become detectives. So Corporal Payne, the day of this homicide, isn't even a detective. He's not even an investigator. He's a patrol guy or a narcotics guy. Okay. Now, this is why in the affidavit, it's important to understand, because they knew the weakness that the defense would go after, where he puts Detective Payne was assisted by ISP and FBI. Because what they did is they handed this to Payne and said, okay, you're about ready to cut your chops here.
Chris, it just occurred to me. Now, this is a theory, in my opinion only. Why would the police department hand the only quadruple homicide case they've arguably ever had, for sure a huge, huge case, okay? Why would they hand it to the most inexperienced guy in that circle? Why wouldn't they give it to the detective who's got 10 years experience, 15 years experience, other homicide experience? Why? So I asked myself that. And this is a theory, and I'm going to throw it out to get your opinion. A guy like him who's that inexperienced is more malleable to the influence of the university. An experienced homicide detective, he or she would push back potentially down the road within the investigation for any kind of interference with the university. But somebody young and inexperienced isn't going to know. He's going to be more of a yes man type of guy. What's your thought?
I can't disagree with you based on the next paragraph. Okay. He says, Sergeant Lawrence said he was also calling the Idaho State Police to ask Region 2 detectives to process the crime scene. So ISP was brought in not to investigate the case. They were brought in to process the crime scene, their lab. which is a great lab. They're good people. But now we get to the crux of conversation. What is the next thing Captain Barrett does? An administrator. I called whoever this person is.
I can tell you
You're-
who it is. Now we know. Even though it's redacted, his
I
name
think
is
it's a female.
no, it's Blaine Eccles. You can see the B and you can see the E. And
Okay.
he was the dean of students, and he may still be.
Okay, so the captain goes from let's get the cops here, start investigating this, to, oh, I better tell the university. Okay. My mind, because the whole reason the Cold Case Foundation exists, one of the reasons, is because of stupid things like this. When the cases go cold, thank goodness they had the DNA. Thank goodness Brian Koberger was stupid. Thank goodness. Okay. Because, and I was, with Billy, Billy was being very nice on Sunday. I love the guy. But a defense attorney, they would have eaten this guy alive. They would have eaten him alive. And in fact, the paragraphs that I just read talked about Barrett. Remember, I just read it a little bit ago. Talked about Barrett coming in and debriefing everybody. And what did the university do? They engaged their team to write talking points, to control the media, to control the narrative. It's right in front of us, everybody. It's right in front of us. And guess what? In my opinion, it hasn't stopped. It has not stopped, because look what he does here. I called Blaine, U of I of Dean of Students, and this other person with U of I Office of Public Safety and Security to inform them of the homicides because the residence was near the U of I campus and the victims appeared to be college students. Okay. What did you call the local gas stations? Did you call all the town businesses where students go to eat? Did you call the grub truck just to let them know? Okay. Oh, you told the university so they could send out a massive Vandy alert. So the real victims who are sitting outside, i.e. the kids that found them, we now know, they get a Vandy alert. Well, here's one for you. Once you identified them, did you call the family? You told the university. It sounds like the university knew before the family knew. And in fact, if I remember correctly, Captain Barrett reached out to Blaine to help coordinate getting the friends of King Road residents away from the crime scene. Immediately, we contacted Carly Freely, Associate Dean of Students, along with the U of I counselor and U of I case manager, to go to MPD and offer support, comfort, and resources to those individuals ushered away from the scene. Blaine also contacted Director of Fraternity and Sorority Life, Nick O'Neill, to prepare when MPD releases the names of the victims. Okay. So what they were doing is the teams collaborated with MPD to determine whether the victims were students and then provide those names of who they were. All right. Here's how it should have gone. Do we know who they are? Yes, sir. How do we know? These are the roommates. Who are they saying they are? Okay. All right. Ethan. Got it. Okay. Got it. Where are they from? They're students here at the university. All right. Well, let's get their horsepower and let's get hold of the families and start working up, their life. Let's figure it out here. If somebody would have said to me, do we need to get hold of the university? I would have said, are they university students? Yeah, not yet. The suspect could be at the university. We don't want to tip him off. So let's keep it close to the chest and let's work it that way. Instead, they went the opposite direction. What if the suspect was from the University of Idaho? They didn't know that at the time, that moment, when Captain is reaching out to the campus security. For all you know, look at the shooter in New York City that was a security guard in Las Vegas that just walked into a building. What are you going to do? You're going to call the security department in Vegas the day of, or the day of the shooting and tell them, hey, we got your guy in here? No, that is not homicide 101. That is not proper protocol, because it gets better. You can't make this up. This is in their own documents. I also met with blankety blank U of I of a associate dean of students at the police department. So the university is now part of the investigation. They're showing up at the PD. Okay. But why are they showing up at the PD? Because they've already organized a communications team and are going to tell the cops how to conduct a press conference. That's what they're doing. Karen, this is your lane. What say you?
I mean, it's just so unheard of. And again, okay, the University of Idaho was always going to have the PR financial stars in their eyes, if you will. That's their agenda. That's what their concern is. Why wasn't the police chief, who is the highest authority in as far as the investigation goes at that point? He should have said, I'm sorry, this is a critical investigation. We have to treat you like the public. It's police protocol. You cannot come into this police department. You cannot be part of the daily updates. You have to be like the public.